Thank you very much. Thank you. As the posters indicate, this is to be a retrospective reading. I shall take a couple of poems from each of my successive books, beginning with For the Unfallen of 1959 and ending with the latest collection without title, Just Out. I'll begin with what I call my Keble poems. 2 or 3 poems that I wrote when I was a second and third year undergraduate at Keble College, and which now constitute the opening poems in my collected poems of 1985. The first is called Genesis. Against the burly air I strode, crying the miracles of God. And first I brought the sea to bear upon the dead weight of the land, and the waves flourished at my prayer, the rivers spawned their sand. And where the streams were salt and full, the tough pig-headed salmon strove, ramming the ebb in the tide's pull to reach the steady hills above. The second day I stood and saw the osprey plunge with triggered claw, feathering blood along the shore to lay the living sinew bare. And the third day I cried, beware the soft-voiced owl, the ferret's smile, the hawk's deliberate stoop in air, cold eyes and bodies hooped in steel, forever bent upon the kill. And I renounced on the fourth day this fierce and unregenerate clay, building as a huge myth for man the watery Leviathan, and made the long-winged albatross scour the ashes of the sea, where Capricorn and Zero cross, a brooding immortality, such as the charmed phoenix has in the unwithering tree. The phoenix burns as cold as frost, and like a legendary ghost, the phantom bird goes wild and lost upon a pointless ocean tossed. So the fifth day, I turned again to flesh and blood, and the blood's pain. On the sixth day, as I rode in haste about the works of God, with spurs I plucked the horse's blood. By blood we live, the hot, the cold, to ravage and redeem the world. There is no bloodless myth will hold. And by Christ's blood are men made free, though in close shrouds their bodies lie under the rough pelt of the sea, though earth has rolled beneath her weight, the bones that cannot bear the light. And a short poem that I wrote also while I was in my undergraduate years at Keble, a short 8-line poem called Merlin. Merlin. I will consider the outnumbering dead, for they are the husks of what was rich seed. Now, should they come together to be fed, they would outstrip the locusts covering tide. Arthur, Elaine, Mordred, they are all gone among the raftered galleries of bone. By the long barrows of Logris they are made one, and over their city stands the pinnacled corn. And another poem called September Song, which has the subtitle or epigraph, born 1906-32, deported 24/9/42. Undesirable you may have been, untouchable you were not forgotten or passed over at the proper time. As estimated, you died. Things marched sufficient to that end. Just so much zyklone and leather, patented terror, so many routine cries. I have made an elegy for myself, it is true. September fattens on vines, roses flake from the wall, the smoke of harmless fires drifts to my eyes. This is plenty. This is more than enough. A few poems from a sequence called the Songbook of Sebastian Arrowruth. This is also from the second book, King Log. I invented this Spanish poet. I gave him the birth date of 1868 and the date of death as 1922, which meant that he died on the very threshold of modernism, without the benefit of having read Ulysses or The Wasteland, and this tells in the rather old-fashioned nostalgia of his writing. Here's a section called Coplas. One cannot lose what one has not possessed. So much for that abrasive gem. I can lose what I want. I want you. Oh, my dear one, I shall grieve for you for the rest of my life, with slightly varying cadence, oh, my dear one. Half mocking the half-truth, I note the wild brevity of sensual love. I am shaken even by that. It is to him I write, it is to her I speak and contain silence. Will they be touched by the unfamiliar passion between them? Here's another of these songs. It's called A Song from Armenia. Arrowruth held a minor diplomatic post in Armenia. Roughly silvered leaves that are the snow on Ararat seen through those leaves. The sun lays down a foliage of shade. A drinking fountain pulses its head 2 or 3 inches from the troughed stone. An old woman sucks there, gripping the rim. Why do I have to relive, even now, your mouth and your hand running over me, deft as a lizard, like a sinew of water? This is old bank note paper, of very good quality. My next book was called Mercian Hymns, and I will read 2 or 3 sections from that. Mercian Hymns followed, for me in those days, quite unusually quickly after King Log, only about 3 years later. This is the naming of Offa. King of the perennial holly groves, the riven sandstone, Overlord of the M5, architect of the historic rampart and ditch, the citadel at Tamworth, the summer hermitage in Holy Cross, guardian of the Welsh Bridge and the Iron Bridge, contractor to the desirable new estates, saltmaster, money changer, commissioner for oaths, martyrologist, the friend of Charlemagne. I liked that, said Offa. Sing it again. Overlord of the M5. This poem was chosen for an American college anthology, an annotated anthology, and at the bottom of the page where it said Overlord of the M5, they put Head of the British Secret Service. And 2 or 3 poems from the very end of Mercian Hymns, which together make up the section called The Death of Offa. Now when King Offa was alive and dead, they were all there, the funereal gleemen, papal legate and rural dean, Merovingian car dealers, Welsh mercenaries, a shuffle of housecarls. He was defunct, they were perfunctory. The ceremony stood acclaimed. The mob received memorial vouchers and signs. After that shadowy, thrashing midsummer hailstorm, earth lay for a while, the ghost bride of livid Thor, butcher of strawberries, and the shire tree dripped red in the arena of its uprooting. Processes of generation, deeds of settlement, the urge to marry well, wit to invest in the properties of healing springs, our children and our children's children, O my masters. Tracks of ancient occupation, frail ironworks rusting in the thorn thicket, hearthstones, charred lullabies, a solitary axe blow that is the echo of a lost sound. Tumult recedes as though into the long rain, groves of legendary holly, silver dark, the ridged gleam. Not strangeness, but strange likeness. Obstinate outclassed forefathers, I too concede, I am your staggeringly gifted child. So murmurous he withdrew from them. Gran lit the gas, his dice whirred in the Ludo cup. He entered into the last dream of Offa the king. And it seemed, while we waited, he began to walk towards us. He vanished. He left behind coins for his lodging and traces of red mud. The next book was Tenebrae of 1978, and that begins with a sequence called The Pentecost Castle, based on the anonymous little songs of Spain, medieval and early Renaissance Spain, and I will read 2 or 3 of those. Slowly my heron flies, pierced by the blade, mounting in slow pain, strikes the air with its cries, goes seeking the high rocks where no man can climb, where the wild balsam stirs by the little stream. The rocks, the high rocks, are brimming with flowers. There love grows, and there love rests and is saved. I shall go down to the lover's well and wash this wound that will not heal. Beloved soul, what shall you see? Nothing at all, yet eye to eye, depths of non-being perhaps too clear, my desire dying as I desire. And one more poem from this book, Tenebrae, from a sequence called An Apology for the Revival of Christian Architecture in England, a poem called The Laurel Axe, The Laurel Axe. Autumn resumes the land, ruffles the woods with smoky wings, entangles them. Trees shine out from their leaves, rocks mildew to moss green. The avenues are spread with brittle floods. Platonic England, house of solitudes, rests in its laurels and its injured stone, replete with complex fortunes that are gone, beset by dynasties of moods and clouds. It stands as though at ease with its own world, the mannerly extortions, languid praise, all that devotion long since bought and sold, the rooms of cedar and soft thudding bays, tremulous boudoirs where the crystals kissed in cabinets of amethyst and frost. In 1983, I brought out a long poem called The Mystery of the Charity of Charles Péguy, and I would like to read the final section of that. Down in the river garden, a grey-gold dawn light begins to silhouette the ash. A rooster wails remotely over the marsh, like Mr. Punch mimicking a lost child. At Villeroy, the copybook lines of men rise up and are erased. Peggy's cropped skull dribbles its ichor, its poor thimbleful, a simple lesion of the complex brain. Woefully battered but not too bloody, smeared by fraternal root crops, and at one with the fritillary and the veined stone, having composed his great work, his small body, for the last rites of truth, whatever they are, or the last judgment, which is much the same, or mercy even, with her tears and fire, he commends us to nothing, leaves a name for the burial detail to gather up, with rank and number, personal effects, the next of kin and a few other facts, his arm over his face as though in sleep or to ward off the sun, the body's prayer, the tribute of his true passion, for Chartres, steadfastly cleaving to the both, for her, the virgin of innumerable charities. Encore plus douloureux et doux. Note how sweetness devours sorrow, renders it again, turns to affliction each more carnal pain. Whatever is fulfilled is now the law, where law is grace, that grace won by inches, inched years. The men of sorrows do their stint, whose Golgothas are the moon's trenches, the sun's blear flare over the salient. J'accuse, j'accuse, making the silver prance and curvet, and the dust motes jig to war across the shaky vistas of old France, the gilt-edged maps of Strasbourg and the Tsar. Low tragedy, high farce, fight for command. March, counter-march, and come to the salute, at every hole and corner burial rite, bellowed with hoarse dignity into the wind. Take that for your example, but still mourn, being so moved, eloge and elegy, so moving on the scene as if to cry, in memory of those things, these words were born. After that, there was a pause of some 12 years before my next book, Canaan, appeared. Another ripping sound as another sheet of old bank note paper gets discarded. And I'll read 2 or 3 poems from Canaan. The first is called Parantalia. It's the first of 2 poems of that title in this book, Parantalia, concerning the parents, having to do with ancestors. The here and now finds vigil, transfiguring whatever is yet ignorant of your beauty. Any one of us, given a certain light, shall make and be immortal. Streets of Jerusalem, seraphs the passers-by, and other extras, artisans per diem, imperative in hindsight, a brief blessing. I cannot tell how we might be otherwise drawn to the things occluded, manifold, the measureless that stands even so depleted in the faint rasp of dry autumnal flowers. A poem called Sorrel, which was inspired by a sentence in one of my great comfort books, The Botany of Worcestershire, published in 1904. It's called Sorrel, and I take a phrase about sorrel from the book I've just named. It says, very common and widely distributed. It is called sorrow in some parts of Worcestershire. Very common and widely distributed. It is called sorrow in some parts of Worcestershire. An irresistible sentence. Memory worsening, let it go, as rain streams on half-visible clatter of the wind lapsing and rising, that clouds the pond's green mistletoe of spawn, seeps among nettle beds and rust-brown sorrel, perpetual ivy burrowed by weak light, makes carved shapes crumble, the ill-weathering stone, salvation's troth plight, plumed of the elect. And a poem called Pisgah, which is in memory of my father, who was a country bobby. And we had one of those houses where the garden rises steeply up at the back of the house. So if you stand at the top of the garden, you're actually looking over the roof of the house. I don't think that's especially relevant, but it was pleasant to remember it. I am ashamed and grieve, having seen you then those many times as now you turn to speak with someone standing deeper in the shade, or fork a row, or pace to the top end where the steep garden overlooks the house. Around you the cane loggias, tent poles, trellises, the flitter of sweet peas caught in their strings, the scarlet runners, blossom that seems to burn an incandescent aura towards evening. This half-puzzled, awkward surprise is yours. You cannot hear me or quite make me out. Formalities preserve us. Perhaps I too am a shade. After that, the books began to come more quickly. The next book was The Triumph of Love of 1998, and I will read 2 or 3 sections from this volume, though as it's, in a sense, a continuous sequence, it's very difficult to excerpt passages from it. This is section 13. Whose lives are hidden in God? Whose? Who can now tell what was taken, or where, or how, or whether it was received? How ditched, divested, clamped, sifted, overlaid, raked over, grassed over, spread around, rotted down with leaf mold, accepted as civic concrete, reinforceable base cinder blocks, tipped into Danube, Rhine, Vistula, dredged up with the Baltic and the Pontic sludge, committed in absentia to solemn elevation, Trauermusik, musique funèbre, funeral music, for male and female voices ringingly a cappella, made for double-string choirs, congregated brass, choice performers on baroque trumpets, hefting like glass blowers, inventions of supreme order. Section 38. Widely established, yet with particular local intensities, the snow half-thawed now hardens over again, glassen-ridged or pashed like fish ice, refracted light red against copper. The hedged sun draws into itself for its self-quenching. If one is so minded, these modalities stoop to re-enter the subterrane of faith, faith that is in real being, the real being God, or more comprehensively, Christ. As a sanctuary lamp treadles its low flame, or as the long-exiled Salve Regina was sung in the crypt at Lastingham on the threshold of a millennium. One of the angel poems from the sequence. From the angels of irrational decision and of reversed order to the angel of improvisation. From the angel of improvisation to the angels of tannic acid, salicil, and plain water. From the angel of advantage, where is the angel of recorded delivery? From the angels of advantage lost, of sacrifice, of surrender, to the angels of merciful intervention and final custody. Section 121. So what is faith if it is not inescapable endurance? Unrevisited, the ferns are breast high, head high, the days lustrous with their hinterlands of thunder. Light is this instant, far seeing into itself, its own signature on things that recognize salvation. I am an old man, a child. The horizon is Traherne's country. The book Speech followed in the year 2000. Again, it's a difficult sequence to excerpt from, but I'll do my best to read one or two of them. About time and about this time, when all her days are fulfilled, as at Pentecost or at the Nativity, the Godhead with her in spirit, like a flint arrowhead touched to a vapor, a flame, intacta, through many roads despoiled, the bride of tongues intimately perfect, perfect though untimely, not our day. Believe it, Augustine saved himself for this, the city of God riding her storm sewers, towering at watch and ward, prophetic, exposed to obscurity, hidden in revelation. They tell you that? Spiritual osmosis, mystique of Argot. I like the gestures that come with it, a kind of dumb thieves' cant. Spirituality, I salute you. Ich kann nicht anders. It was not so much cultic pathology I had in mind as ethical satire. But you wriggle so, old shapeshifter. Since I am compromised, I shall say more. Assume the earphones. Not music, Hebrew. Poetry aspires to the condition of Hebrew. Say that it is a wind in the mulberry trees. Who will know? The section I shall read now is a tribute to those heroic women who parachuted into France during the Second World War to aid the French resistance, many of whom were captured and tortured before being put to death. Night and fog it is then, comrades. Nacht und Nebel goes always for the throat, pharynx, jugular. once for all costs of live demonstration waived. A few dead women late admitted heroes on generous terms. Sign here with broken hands patched up for the occasion. Thank you, Odette, Violette. No further questions commensurate with your knowledge. Stand at ease against the wall. Unflattering photographs almost without exception, cracked and stained. Darkest at finest hour, add salt to taste. The next book after Speech is The Orchards of Zion. Again, I will read two or three sections from that book. This is section 36. Downhill to go, then up the long curve of field. December chastens the stream bed. Frosted mist hangs in autumn's lisau. The far slope burns hazy yellow where it is spring. I count our seasons clockwise, with nadir and zenith on the year's face. Between 5 and 6, that's all I can see to tell you. The lifelines tug briefly, my coming from way back, a child's journey between worlds, though this is at best half the fable. Atem Wende, turn of breath, Spinnrad, turn of wheel. Many returns melt barriers, and the winged lion roars his obeisance. Not good chiasma if you cannot make crossing. Babylon's candles are lit for children far older than their time, of whom fondly no one despairs. I did the Lady Julian an injustice, which I will leave for evidence against me configured by the final stroke. Of course hell is empty, or the end will erase it in its due place and order. Poets leap over death. Was that Coleridge? If so, did anyone see him do it and live? Section 55. This is a poem inspired by a recollection of taking part in Bromsgrove County High School's production of Twelfth Night, and it is really implicitly dedicated to the two young ladies, one who played Olivia and the other Viola, who played those parts, as they say, to my Orsino. I'd actually auditioned for Malvolio, and I would have made a splendid Malvolio. But they forced me to be Orsino, and the only thing that the school magazine could find to say of me in the report on the play was that Hill gave us a strongly built duke. I desire so not to deny desire's intransigence. To you I stand answerable. Correction must once have stood. What's this thing like a clown's eyebrow brush? Oh, my lady, it is the fool's confession, weeping grease paint, all paint and rhetoric. Empower the muse, I'm tired. Shakespeare, who scarcely brooded on perfection, perfect so many times. Memory, memory, the eye elaborates its tears, but misremembered, misremembering no less key-clustered mistletoe, the orchard chatelaine. I may well carry my 3 engraved thoughts out beyond Shrawley, whose broad verges once throve like spare garden plots with pear and apple, or with wild damson, thinner on the ground. Oh, my lady, this is a fool's profession, and you may be dead, or with Alzheimer's, or happily still adoring a different Duke of Illyria. I have set you up, I confess that, so as not to stint your voice of justice. Love grows in some way closer to withdrawn theology. The deist's orb drops below Anchordine. And this is the last section of the book. Never an off-season, call for the voicer of fair omen. The voice persists in rising monotone, talk obsession to ecstasy, switch off my word, lie down in the space provided, pollen and basalt, dame rainbow, ancient lover of water, immortal for want of a better term, self-remnant in each element of the same desire, not as she once was, metaphysical and like wild. Weigh the importunate nature of being with a light husk, the grasshoppers, tall storyteller of the Hesperides, with hymns to divine aphasia, for it is she. Even so, Golden Grove might have been Silvertown, could be gold as green. You can't rule on that. Finis was the last word to escape me, period. Stop trying to amuse with such gleeful sorrow. Here are the orchards of Zion, neither wisdom nor illusion of wisdom, not compensation, not recompense. The orchards of Zion, whatever harvests we bring them. We now come on to the penultimate book, Scenes from Comus, which I will read, 2 or 3 sections, 2 or 3, not sections, but bits. That from this noise, this melee, there issues a grand and crabby music, and that I want my piece of it, even when not mine. That vows so made are like lights on snowplows, purpose and power at once. Look what gets tossed aside. Massive effects are junked. And they talk about heavy metal. They don't know, these kids, what weight of the word is, that in the half-dark of commodity, most offers are impositions. That was the section that led A.N. Wilson to write that I was now writing like a silly old git. And the last section of the last bit of the middle section, the 80 courtly masking dances. I should explain that the Icelandic name that occurs in this bit, Guthrithr Thorbjarnadóttir, is the name on the nose of a Boeing 757 belonging to Iceland Air. While the height-challenged sun fades, clouds become as black barren as lava, wholly motionless, not an ashen wisp out of place, while the sun fades. While the sun fades, its fields glow with dark poppies. Some plenary hand spreads out to flaunt an end, old gold imperial colors. Look back a shade, Guthrithr Thorbjarnadóttir, over your left shoulder or mine. Absolute night comes high stalking after us. And here's a bit from the third section, specially included because I am reading in Oxford. Image of egg whites, threaded as extruded through boiling water, Lear's numbskull friend with his tarred whited sockets. Admit one to the theatre, the observatory, to the small cinema showing new foreign films, the Museum of Glances, the Ecclesia Sancti Pauli in Walton Street. I had forgotten how the ill-omened road configures at this point. I catch my breath. The clues in the projector, out of focus for 50 years, a face blurred to declare itself in some way of saying no. Last year also I brought out a largish booklet with the Klutag Press called A Treatise of Civil Power, and I will read one poem from that. It's called A Cloud in Aquila, and it's another Worcestershire poem. It's about Alan Turing and his great friend Christopher Morcom, who lived in Worcestershire. In fact, I think the Morcom's house was the last house on my father's beat, and he used to point it out to me, and as we went past and say that belongs to Colonel Morcom, because we didn't know at the time that Alan Turing was a visitor to that house. Get him out of there, Turing out of the Turing machine. Some hope, if the rules of immortality can be bent, I should hope so. The world of his prediction is not ours as he conceived it. If there is innocence, it was as here, phase, segment, region of Aquila, that validates and haunts first love, verifies disappointment itself, meaningless in the absence of spirit. Whatever the mechanism of the thing, desire, the singing calculus, impossible pseudoscience, Eddington, MacTaggart, their measure of the mind, nubilate, precise, roving existence at call. Anyway, the idea of love is what joins us thus far, though not past all question, in the same tissue of body. And Morcom is well dead, and Turing with him, the clockhouse demolished. At the sharp turn where it was always dark, the road steepens to Hausmann's Pisgah. Now we come to the final book, without title, which has just came out this week. And I shall read, to conclude my recital, I shall read 3 poems from this book. The first that I shall read is called The Jumping Boy. Here is the jumping boy, the boy who jumps as I speak. He is at home on the King's Highway, in call of the tall house, its blind gable end, the trees. I know this place. The road on broad contourings drawn out of sight stops wherever, but not at Lioness, though from Lioness I shall bring you through grimed orchards, across gorse-hummocked old common land, everywhere given back to the future of memory. He leaps because he has serious joy in leaping. The girl's eyes know way allowed for, or else she is close in covert, and we are to know that, not knowing how. I'll bet she worships his plebeian bullet head, Hermes' winged plimsolls, the crinkled toy tin hat held on by elastic. He is winning a momentous and just war with gravity. This may be levitation. I could do that. Give my remembrance to his new body. These episodes occur. Jump away, jumping boy. The boy I was shouts, go. And a poem from towards the end of the book called Broken Hierarchies. When to depict rain, heavy rain, It stands in dense verticals diagonally lashed, chalk white, yet with the chalk translucent. The roadway sprouts 1,000 flowerets, storm paddies instantly reaped, replenished, and again cut down. The holding burden of a wisteria, drape amid drape, the sodden copia of all things, flashing and drying. First here after the storm, these butterflies fixed on each jinking run, probing, priming, then leaping back, a babble of silent tongues, and the flint church also choiring into dazzle. Like Appalachian music, those aureate stark sounds, plucked or bowed, a wild patience replete with loss, the twankled dulcimer, scrawny rich fiddle gnawing, a man's low voice that looms out of the drone, the hummingbird that is not of these climes, and the great wanderers like the albatross, the ocean ranging in, laying itself down on our alien shore. And to conclude the reading, my version, my very close free translation of a poem by Eugenio Montale called La Bufera, The Storm. The storm that batters the magnolia's impermeable leaves, the long-drawn drum roll of Martian thunder with its hail, crystal acoustics trembling in your night's lair disturb you, while the gold transfumed from the mahoganies, the pages' rims of deluxe books, still burns, a sugar grain under your eyelid shell. Lightning that makes stark white the trees, the walls, suspending them, interminable instant, marbled manna and cataclysm, deep in you sculpted, born now as condemnation. This binds you closer to me, strange sister, than any love. So the harsh buskings, bashing of castanets and tambourines around the spoiler's ditch, fandango's foot rap, and over all some gestures still to be defined, as when you turned away and casting with a hand that cloudy mass of hair from off your forehead, gave me a sign and stepped into the dark. Thank you.